Every day I really try to help bring people together so that solutions are built where we really do defend and protect our country so that my children, my grandchildren, and the generation after have the best that my father fought for and made sure that I had.
My guest today is the serial public servant, Bridget Bean. With over 30 years of experience across multiple executive agencies, Bridget has seen firsthand the increasing strategic interest in cybersecurity as a fundamental element of our national security.
The more the American citizens understand that interconnectivity in their daily lives and the potential risks to it, they'll take more ownership. Industry will take more ownership. We at the national level are taking more ownership. So through awareness and action, I think we're going to have a much more effective strategy for national security as we look at our adversaries, our nation-state actors who are looking to really disrupt our way of life, to be perfectly honest.
In her current role leading the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, Bridget is at the front line of the modern battle space between the U.S. and the array of threats that we face.
Take China, right? They've said the unification of Taiwan is critically important. They've said 2027. We know that they are committed to that, and they know they don't want us involved. They are doing what they can to either discourage us or prevent us.
Our conversation dives deep into the mission of CISA and its current iteration under the new administration, and brings to light what's coming next for one of our youngest but most important federal agencies. And now, here's Bridget Bean. Welcome to the show. First, in front of you, you have a handful of notes here. So I think there's a lot that we want to talk about today. There's a lot we want to cover. Let's start just by introducing who you are and where you're currently at, because I know we have a deep background. We're going to spend a lot of time exploring today, but let's talk about your current role and what you're working on.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Again, this is a long title, Senior Official Performing the Duties of the Director of CISA. What does that mean? It means I'm currently leading the CISA team as we await permanent leadership from the administration. But it's a fabulous job. I've been at CISA for a couple of years and really leading the team to be an operational agency to defend our homeland against cybersecurity and physical attacks against our networks and our critical infrastructure.
Long title. I imagine the responsibility list is even longer.
It can be daunting at days, but the reward of making sure that you're protecting your family, your communities, the state, and the nation, it is well worth it.
One thing I've gathered, so I've been in private industry, all of my career. The last several years, I've gotten to interact with a lot more people in the public side, in the institutions like CISA and others. And I've gotten this impression, particularly around CISA, that the team there, the people there, tend to be exceptional. And I've always heard just like constant feedback of there's some really, really talented, very passionate people there.
Yeah, that is a true statement. I have been in public service for a hot minute, a long while, however you want to phrase it. And I have worked with really phenomenal public servants, but there is something unique and special about the team at CISA. They are innovative. They're risk takers. They understand threat. They understand the need to really be forward leaning. They're smartest. They are best in class. We have some of the brightest minds working at CISA to protect the homeland. And it's an honor and somewhat very humbling to be among them.
Do you think it's the mission that drives that gets people in the door and keeps them there?
It is. And I think there's a couple of things. People are there for the mission, for sure. It's also something that I think the workforce is very familiar with. A lot of our team members grew up with technology, understand the power of technology and the good that it can do, but they really understand potentially the havoc that can be wreaked with our interconnectivity in a digital world. Right. And so these really smart individuals are here to make sure that we are using technology to make life better for America, but also making sure that it's protected and defended so that nothing bad happens.
Right. So they understand the threat.
They do.
And that the threat is real. Mm-hmm. We'll spend some time talking about threats because I think we get threats from so many different angles. But one thing that I always try to make the point, you go home, you talk to your friends who are not in the public sector or aren't in cybersecurity. There can be in the conversations I have with them, this like skepticism about institutions and about public servants, there's often this idea that, you know, the people aren't passionate, mission focused, that, I don't know, there's just been like a growing skepticism of the institution. And I always try to tell people, like, I haven't met everybody that works for the government in some capacity, but pretty much everybody I've met who is, and it's not a small number, are passionate, well-motivated, interested in the mission, true believers, and are trying to do the best that they can for the people.
Yeah, I think that's true. And if you think about it, who are they? Who are these cyber defenders? Who are these critical infrastructure, securing our nation? They're your neighbors, right? They're the parents of your kids who they go to school with. They're the coach of your little league team. They're the person who's checking you out, that you'll see in the grocery store. These are our neighbors. These are the people who have committed their lives to public service. And, as a serial public servant myself, what drew me was to help others, to be that servant leader, to help make sure that I am protecting and safeguarding the liberties that we enjoy in whatever way it is, in whatever agency you're in. That's really what they're doing. And I think that's what draws them in.
Yeah, I think for the right people, that's a very powerful motivator. When you have really bright, intelligent people, they have so many different opportunities in the private sector. I think that, the monetary opportunity sometimes draws people out, or the entrepreneurial opportunity, and a lot of them are offered that track. They must have a deep belief in what they're working on to stay on the public sector side.
I think that's true, but I am really encouraged with the workforce today. And that's the workforce that's here 3 to 5 years, and then they get a job in the private sector and they go, and then they come back. And how much more rich are we as a nation to have that knowledge that they've obtained in the private sector to come back? And so for this workforce, it's that in and out. It's the movement between industry and the government that is, I think, really exponentially driving us to greater success, because to understand a problem set from multiple lenses makes the solution so much more robust. So,
does that build a cohesion between industry and public sector that's important?
It does. It's not like people leave. We just, forward deploy them somewhere. And it's so wonderful to have people strategically placed in agencies so that those partnerships can either be built or to be strengthened. And that trust, which is key to CISA's success, is really important. And when you have people who worked and understand the products and services or what we do at CISA, and then go into the private sector or state and local government, that relationship is built. And then you can really move things forward quickly and much more efficiently.
Which makes sense. I think most progress is made through, relationship building. Mm-hmm. And as a cybersecurity and technical person by background, that's a long lesson that I had to learn. A lot of times you can feel like everything progresses in technology because of hands-on keyboard, and that's how you get things done. But I found in the real world, the way you get things done is through those relationships.
It is. I mean, cybersecurity, technology, it's people, right? It's all about relationships. It's all about people, and it's all about trust. And it's one of the core things that brought me into public service was understanding that helping people, trusting people, and building that for others was really important.
You mentioned, what we do at CISA. That may be something that not everyone has a good handle on. It has been at times brought into the national focus through political news and happenings there. People may have an idea of what it is, but I think it's probably worth talking about what is it that CISA is doing.
So CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, security is important, we say it twice. We really do work to protect our cyber environment and critical infrastructure. And critical infrastructure, what is that? I mean, I hate that term. I wish there was a more relatable term, but it's, it's our water, it's our wastewater, it's our transportation, it's our communications, it's all those things that American citizens rely on every day. And so what we do is we work to protect the federal network. So every agency has an IT infrastructure ecosystem, and we work with them to make sure that it is hardened and protected. Okay. And then we work with the private sector, because most of the critical infrastructure owners and operators are privately owned. And so, a water treatment plant in, middle America provides clean water, clean drinking water to millions of people in 4 states. If they get a cyber attack, and they've got to shut down operations, or God forbid something more nefarious, like there's too much chlorine in the water that could really have a negative health impact, we want to make sure that those entities understand the threat and how do we help them mitigate it. And because the beauty of cybersecurity is that it's ever evolving, those threats are ever evolving. And so we need those relationships so that we are constantly sharing information. We don't want to be knocking on their door, saying we have a problem, and then who are you? So that constant relationship that we're building across the country is really important, so that we continue to help them, and on a bad day, we're there for them.
I think it's a key point that it's a lesson that I've learned, just filming the podcast and having different people on. We recently had Sean Stalzer on. He's the CISA of Dominion Energy, and he made me aware of the fact that the energy sector is not just the big monolithic energy companies and the public utilities the way you think of them. There are small scale solar providers on the grid who, as he was talking about the scenario, they see solar providers come online who have a decent sized plant, but then they have no cybersecurity infrastructure whatsoever, but they have to get on the grid. They have to rely on them. And so now it's, big energy's problem to figure out all these small, networks coming online aren't protected, and that makes them vulnerable because they're all, on the same. I think a lot of people probably assume all these critical infrastructure sectors are just big monolithic companies. It's all tightly controlled. It's not what it really is, which is, to your point, these are a lot of small organizations, privately owned, not highly regulated, and they need help. And so that's what CISA is
much
doing.
like the communications industry, right? It's not just the big names, but there's hundreds and hundreds of critically important telecommunications entities across the country that are providing connectivity or support to the big telecom companies, and those are the people who are critical to the success, and so they also have to be super diligent about their cybersecurity, and that's where we really play a critical role to those people who might not have the resources and access to information that some of the big folks do. And so it's a really important niche for us to address.
Hugely. The world I live in my professional life, I largely work with small and medium-sized businesses, and trying to do what they're trying to do with all the constraints they have as small businesses already, just from like personnel and all the different things they're trying to do as business owners and business leaders, then, to come in and tell them about the real threat that poses them. I work primarily with defense contractors, and, explaining to a small 40-person defense contractor that you are a target, you're an interesting target, you're increasingly targeted because our nation state threats, understand you don't have the resources of a mega prime contractor. That's hard for them. And then to come to them and tell them like, hey, you're already resource constrained, but I need more because we have to play defense against a larger threat. It's been challenging.
So you're striking a chord with me. I spent many years at the Small Business Administration.
Yes.
So I have a really special place in my heart for small and medium-sized businesses. They really are the engine of our economy, and it's where amazing innovation comes from, and just really a critical piece of our economic security. But to your point, they're busy running their businesses, and I remember, as technology was becoming more and more prevalent with small businesses, helping them understand from the very beginning that it has to be part of their leadership concerns. And it's hard to juggle, right? You're chief cook and bottle washer, you're a marketeer, you're all these things. And then to add this other line of effort that they have to focus on has been hard. But I'll tell you, if there's what we can do from CISA is to help with no cost, low cost, continuous services that can help them, that where they don't have to pay for it. And then our field forces can go in and help them understand what those threats and risks are. But it is really important in the defense industry. Small businesses, medium-sized businesses are so essential in the supply chain and in the delivery of national defense. So
I think generally people maybe don't understand the depth at which small and medium businesses are the engine of not just the economy, but so many of these critical sectors. Again, go back to the energy companies that are, a lot of them are very small, startup level sort of organizations. It's not all a big monolith, and they have all those challenges.
Yeah, well, the statistic I think is 99% of all, small businesses hire and employ 99% of all citizens. So, the majority of us work for a small business, depending on the size. And so, co-ops, right? I spent some time at FEMA. And so during disasters, you see really all the different types of critical infrastructure owners and operators and their energy co-ops and their privately owned water treatment plants, or even state and locals and local governments that are similar to in many ways, a smaller, medium-sized business that doesn't have the resources. And so understanding their challenges, and so helping them in a way to prepare for a bad day, to avert a cyber attack or a physical attack, and then to respond and to recover from quickly so that operations aren't down and have that incredible impact across the community is really important. So
CISA is helping, I think in very practical ways and very direct ways. One of my favorite ways that CISA has helped me personally is through influence and opinion almost. I wish I could remember off the top of my head the names of the authors of this, but one of my pet projects as a cybersecurity professional has been a technology called single sign-on. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies, a lot of software companies put that behind their enterprise pricing. And so when you're a small business, one of the best things you can do is only have one identity. It's just a great way to control risk. But you have to pay for the enterprise grade of a tool to get access to that technology. Mm-hmm. Well, CISA put out basically a paper saying this is irresponsible. This is basic security in 2023 or 24, whenever they wrote it, basically challenging industry and the software companies, bringing that capability down to your lowest tier pricing so that everyone, especially the small businesses who probably need it most from a security standpoint, can tap into it. That won me over if it wasn't already,
Well, I think, our new Secretary of Homeland Security is going to, in San Francisco, is going to have her first opportunity to give a keynote speech on cybersecurity.
At RSA.
At RSA out in San Francisco. And she is, having been a governor, she really understands the imperative of good cybersecurity for the state and for her small businesses. Most of South Dakota is small businesses. And she was instrumental in getting Dakota State University to really build a wildly robust cyber program there and doing a great job. But one of the things she's going to talk about she's got a couple of key points that she's going to make at RSA. And one of them is everybody has a responsibility. And to your point, the people who develop and deploy software, they need to make sure it's secure when it's released. And so she's going to have a call to action to industry. No more time for talking. Time for action. And she's going to expect and demand, and as a federal government, we are going to use every tool we have to drive action. Industry has said that this is important, this what we call secure by design. Mm-hmm. It's not new. It's a framework that's been around for, 70 years. So we've been admiring the problem. The call to action that Secretary Noem is going to say is now is the time. We must act, and we are going, as a federal government, going to do everything we can to encourage and incentivize good behavior by industry. The government is going to use its power of the purse, if you will, to buy secure software. We're going to invoke every rule in the federal acquisition regulation, the law that governs.
Unfortunately, I know it so well.
I'm sure you do. But there are already obligations, clauses in the FAR that say software that's sold to the government has to meet certain security standards.
Yeah.
We have not always enforced those. In this administration, Secretary Noem, along with the entire federal government, is going to say, no more. This is what we will tolerate. And what we will tolerate is soft secure that we are spending money on. And so we think through industry who has recognized that this is an issue and has said that they want to correct the problem, and the federal government's ability to drive behavior through procurement. I think we're really going to see positive action in software development and deployment.
I think one of the key motivators of action would be procurement.
It does drive a lot.
The market moves to what the customer demands. The federal government's the largest customer probably on the face of the earth.
And again, as I think about some of these large software providers, We may not be their biggest customers, but a lot of people look to see what the government uses and then they imitate it.
Yeah.
So we have influence and impact in both tangible and intangible ways. And I think large technology companies understand that. And so her call to action is going to be, talking is over. I want to see action. We're going to do our part on the federal government, and industry needs to do theirs as well.
It makes me optimistic that someone like you is in your role as well to execute influence that understands the small business side of things. Oftentimes on the small business side, we can feel left behind. And if, we have CISA and that sort of campaign trying to challenge these software providers and technology providers and cloud providers, don't forget about the small businesses. Yeah. Don't take away good security and hide it behind the pricing they can't afford. I love that. Yeah. That use of the federal government's influence to change that. You
cannot put the onus of responsibility. You can't put the burden on the consumer, right? If you're buying a product, you should be able to assume that it's safe. And so for a small business, a medium-sized business, to buy a product and to have known vulnerabilities in the software, to have to go and find, how do I enable security features in a guide that's 1,000 pages long. Yes. Online, I think is unconscionable, to be honest. And so this is where one of her key priorities is going to be making industry do what they should do that will benefit small, medium-sized businesses, as well as state and locals who don't have a lot of resources either. And so she is very practical. We work closely with the Small Business Administration. We've got Small Business Week coming up. And so we're partnering on a number of opportunities to share with small businesses cybersecurity, the importance, and how they can, through several simple, low-cost, no-cost, increase their security, and then what can we do moving forward? And they have a voice as well, right? So where are they going to spend their money? And so I think it's exciting because there's real traction and there's a whole of government approach on this. And that is something that I haven't seen in the past. And that's where I think the difference is going to be made.
I do wonder, has there ever been a secretary level keynote given at a conference like RSA?
That's a really funny you say that. I don't think so. Yeah. But I think what this does is really shows, she's been really focused on other areas of DHS, the border and other things, which were a super high priority, and she's done a fabulous job. But it is not at the expense of cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is homeland security. And so she is focused on that. And so when she talks about homeland security, national security, it's land, it's border, it's air, it's maritime, and it's cybersecurity. And she's looking at it in a collective way so that we're all working together and that we are efficient and effective because we understand what the other is doing, and bringing it all together into a well-meshed homeland security.
Well, yeah, I think it speaks volumes to engage directly with industry in that way. Getting, again, as a cybersecurity professional, much of my career has been, you're not the most important part of any organization. You're a support piece of an organization, which I get and I've always been okay with. But sometimes it's kind of felt like you guys aren't that important. You're kind of off to the side. Like, don't bother us with your problems. I've seen in the last decade a real increase in attention, and we increasingly are, I think the threat is being better understood. The real impact of poor cybersecurity is being much better understood. Unfortunately, sometimes through the pain of seeing what happens when we get compromised. Seeing a cabinet level secretary now addressing the cybersecurity committee writ large is a show. I think that the threat's being taken very seriously at the highest level.
Yeah. Yep. We're thrilled that she is there. And, I'm excited that this is happening and that we'll be able to amplify her message. That will be, available for, millions of viewers.
So there's a change in tone then from, DHS and CISA about, hey, like you said, the talk is over. It's time to put, wheels to road, put action in place here. Are there any other big sweeping changes coming to both DHS and CISA?
So there are, and I would describe it as the elegance of the plan is its simplicity. President Trump has said, I want common sense decisions. I want to get back to basics. And so what we're doing, what this administration is doing, what the secretary has mandated us to do is really look at our core authorities. What are our foundational authorities that establish us? And really go back to what are we called to do? And make sure that we are driving to fulfill those authorities which Congress has given to us, and that we're doing it efficiently and effectively. And sometimes that means that we have to prioritize. So instead of an all hazards base, we're going to a risk-informed base. And that's going to help us really prioritize the services we provide. Do they make a difference, right? Sometimes over time, you build stuff and it may or may not work, but you never quit the stuff that doesn't work and focus on the stuff that does. And fortunately, CISA is only 6 years old. And so we're old enough to have some experience under our belt. We're old enough to know what's worked and what hasn't worked. But we're not that old that we're so set in our ways that we can't change. And again, the workforce that we have, they're really forward-leaning, always looking for something new. So we're at that perfect place of kind of 6 years old to look back at our core authorities. What are we supposed to do? What did Congress mean for us to do when they created CISA, right? And it was really to bring the public-private partnership together to increase cybersecurity and security for our critical infrastructure. So what we're doing is we're looking at those authorities, we're looking at our functions, we're making sure that those functions are directly derived from the authorities and that they're achieving the result that was intended. And things that aren't meeting that criteria, we're not going to do them. And we're going to redeploy those resources into the things that are. And one of the big things that the Secretary is going to talk about is our responsibility to the federal civilian IT enterprise, right? Every federal agency has a huge IT enterprise. And so, and every American now gets most of their services online, whether it's, Social Security or HHS or Veterans Affairs. And so we want to make sure that those are secure because all of those endpoints are opportunities for our adversaries to get in, right? And so we have a huge responsibility to both the federal agencies, but also to the American people who utilize those services to make sure that those systems are secure. So that's one of the number one priorities for the Secretary is to make sure that we're protecting the federal networks. And by doing that, we're also learning information that we share with private sector. So it is a 2-for-1, if you will, right? So what we learn, what we see on the federal side is absolutely applicable to the private sector side because cyber enemies, they don't care. They don't discriminate. Right. They're just searching anywhere. So what we learn on the federal side, we can apply to the private sector side. The other thing that she's going to really highlight is critical infrastructure, right? How are we helping them? What do they need? And before this all hazards approach had effect, what it isn't is targeted effect where we really know it's making a difference. So we're really working with them on the ground to understand and help them understand both what are the risks, what are the threats, what are the actions that they can take to really harden their defenses, which, to the point you made earlier, they're interconnected to somebody else. They're probably somewhere in the supply chain of some really important either DoD initiative or an energy initiative. And so really making sure that our critical infrastructure owners and operators are really hardened against cyber attacks and physical attacks. The other thing that she's going to highlight is what is our role, right? Our role is to really defend this nation against cyber attacks. How do we do that? We do that through partnership. We do that with other agencies. We do that with the private sector. And then on a bad day, when there is a significant cyber attack, we are going to convene and coordinate the United States government response to a significant cyber attack. She has been clear and focused, and the president has mandated her. And he's, all of his executive orders include the words efficiency and effectiveness, right? Common sense, all those things back to basics. And so she has really distilled that down to every component. And so our mandate are those, starting with the federal civilian agencies, but really looking at what we're doing. Is it making a difference? Can we prove that it's moving the needle? Is it making us more secure? And I think it's fun because the way she's doing it is in a way that I think is going to resonate with the American people. Going into a SCIF these days, you have to look at your watch, your phone, your ring. Everything is connected to the internet. And the more the American citizens understand that interconnectivity in their daily lives and the potential risks to it, they'll take more ownership. Industry will take more ownership. We at the national level are taking more ownership. So through awareness and action, I think we're going to have a much more effective strategy for national security as we look at our adversaries, our nation-state actors who are looking to really disrupt our way of life, to be perfectly honest.
Certainly doesn't sound like we're going to be complacent, and we're not just operating with the status quo. It's hard driving aggressive goals of what we're trying to do. The influence that CISA is trying to execute at all those levels you just described should result in some pretty substantial change and movement on these things.
Yeah. So my dad was a Marine, and I'm 6 of 7 children, and my dad was a Marine, and he said to me, "Run to the sound of gunfire. Run to the sound of gunfire." And, as I got older, I more fully understood what that meant. And it means go to where the problem is. Don't shy away. Don't become complacent. Don't leave that problem to be solved by somebody else. And so my passion for public service was really driven by his public service, as a Marine. And that call, to go to the gunfire, to understand where the big problems are, don't shy away. And so to really try and take everything you can to solve the problem. And I know you've read the 2025, annual threat assessment put out by the intelligence community. China, our number one adversary, they're there and they are persistent. Not to say that Russia, Iran, and North Korea are not, but we are currently every day combating their presence in our critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we have got to make sure that we are doing everything we can to hunt and harden against that so that our way of life is protected and that our American citizens continue to enjoy the liberties and just the way of life and not have it disrupted for China's or someone else's desire for us not to be able to do that.
Let's talk about China. Well, broadly, I guess we could talk about nation-state threats, but China in particular. It used to be cybersecurity compromise and attacks were financially motivated. There's a lot of cyber criminal activity that might have been state-sponsored. Now it is full-blown state activity. It's military activity in cyberspace that we see a lot of, and it used to not impact critical infrastructure. Hospitals weren't considered targets. Water wasn't considered a target. It seems the rules are relaxing, or that people are not holding themselves to a civilized standard. I don't know. It just seems like they're targeting more and more our actual way of life as opposed to just being a nuisance and disruptor for financial reasons. What is motivating that from a nation state actor that they are trying to get into, our water supply or energy supply?
Well, there's lots of reasons, right? And you touched on a couple of them. So espionage is one, right? And China is, we talk about Salt Typhoon and how the PRC got into our telecommunications companies. And that was really for counterintelligence espionage. Sometimes getting into our critical infrastructure is for monetary gain, to steal intellectual property, to lay in, to just get in and move around undetected, and then just stay and wait and see. There may come a time when they want to do a cyber offensive, and so what we're seeing is. And this is part of the challenge, right? There's so many incentives, there's so many reasons, and you can't really tell who's working for who. And cyber criminals will sell to the highest bidder or whatever. So it's hard to understand necessarily the diagram of who's who. But what we do know is that we need to be really careful for our critical infrastructure to make sure that, take China, right? They've said the unification of Taiwan is critically important.
Right.
They've said 2027. We know two things. We know that they are committed to that, and they know they don't want us involved. And so they are doing what they can to either discourage us or prevent us, right?
Right.
So embedding in our critical infrastructure, if you take down our electrical thing, I work for FEMA. After a disaster, lights go out, there's no air conditioning, there's no energy, you can't get gas from the pumps. All these things do two things. One, it causes societal panic, right? Causes chaos.
Yeah.
Secondly, it impacts our ability to do force movement. It impacts us to do a lot of things. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach for them, to break the American will, if you will, not to engage with a good partner. So as we think about this, it has such deep implications. And as we think about our nation-state actors or criminals, cyber criminals, a ransomware can have the same effect, right? You could stop operations. And does the critical infrastructure owner and operator know how to do it manually, right? We worked with a water treatment plant, and the person who knew the manual was on vacation. And so, fortunately...
So if the attack happened while they're on vacation, water doesn't flow until...
It stopped. They had to re-divert water from somewhere else until the person came back, which he did come back, obviously, within about 6 hours. But this is, right, so this is just good preparedness. What do you do on a bad day? And this is where CISA can come in and help. So really help critical infrastructure owners and operators understand the left of boom and the right of boom. And so help them really understand what do they need to do to protect, to stop it, and then what to do to mitigate it if they do have a cyber attack. And, we also work on the physical side, right? So again, you can't separate physical and cyber because one's going to have an influence on the other. You probably saw in the news yesterday that we did a huge full-scale exercise up in Philadelphia at the Eagles football field.
I didn't see that. I try to avoid paying attention to anything Eagles football related. As a Washington fan,
it's not where I would have done it, but that's a whole nother story. But we had about 700 people participate in this full-scale live exercise. We had emergency managers, we had law enforcement, we had hospitals, we had the entire community participate, and there was a bomb, there was a suspicious package, and there was a vehicle ramming. And what we have learned time and time again is people have security plans, but they don't exercise them. They don't know what they are. And it's true on the cyber and the physical side.
They just sit there and collect dust.
They just collect dust. And, who do I call? Mary Jane Snickerdoodle. Well, she's no longer in that role because I haven't looked at it in 2 years. So it's this constant exercising of good security practices. That's true in cyber and it's true in physical. And so we really try and bring that holistic approach to our partners, so that if you're looking at the physical, you're also looking at the cyber. The minute you come in, you've got a fast card, you've got a fob, you've got something. So the minute you step on prem, you're dealing with cyber, even if if you're not thinking that way. So we're really trying, as the secretary has told us, is to be super efficient and effective. And so the more we can properly align those two, the less burden we're putting on our partners and the bigger benefit we're going to have, both for us to get information, but also to help them be more resilient.
I think a big thread that I can pull through what we were just talking about there is developing and building resilience. You talk about the societal panic and how, a nation-state actor can impact one small utility and stop water flow for a whole community for 6 hours. May not sound wild, but that imagine 24 hours. I've always loved the quote that society is only ever 3 meals away from total collapse, and it's kind of grounded in that resilience that we need. Yeah. Those attacks are going to happen. They do happen. They're inevitable. There's only so much we can do to shore up. Being prepared, as you mentioned, to left of boom, but also to right of boom, and having these exercises when we know these things are going to happen is super important.
Yeah, it is. And understanding that you don't have to do it alone. So we work with small and medium-sized critical infrastructure entities all the time. And so we help them build their incident response plan. And then we help them exercise it. And then on a bad day, we have people in every state and every territory, cybersecurity advisors, who can go in and help them with incident response. And we are not hands-on keyboard, but we have the clarity of mind because it's not our worst day. And we can help them walk through those important steps to reconstitute. But we also can help them understand the TTPs of the actor that has attacked them. So, for example, several months ago, there was a critical infrastructure that had a ransomware attack. And so they were going to, pull their old files and rebuild. And they were going to go back 4 days. And we were able to say, this actor historically is in 14 to 22 days before they pull the ransomware. So if I were you, I wouldn't go back this many days, go back this many days to your, to your files, and then, reconstitute from there. And that way you're not just you're not putting the attacker back in your, So this is the value that we bring, this intelligence that we can bring, understanding the TTPs of, a cybersecurity, criminal, and that way we really help them through the incident response.
Collaboration seems to be a big concept, both between CISA and private industry, but also cross agency. You mentioned your background with FEMA. I'm sure at this point, because of that physical and cybersecurity kind of blending, FEMA and CISA, you guys must be working close together.
Yep, we do. In some instances, we're even in the same building. Because incident response and consequence management are it's just chapter 2 and chapter 3.
Right.
And so helping understand a couple of things. We help FEMA understand interdependencies, right? What's that secondary, tertiary interdependency? When a disaster hits, where do they get their water from? It may be here, but so are other people. So what are some of the other options after a disaster that we may help shorten the time of someone figuring out where they can get backup water? And so we work really closely with FEMA. Again, if there's a physical Mother Nature or a man-made disaster, it's going to have cyber implications. If there is a hurricane, and most hospitals, if you've ever tried to manage patients manually anymore, it's really hard. And we help them exercise when a hospital no longer has their IT system, and to try and manage patients. So we really try and help them think through, and what are some of the resources we can bring to bear to make sure that they can be up and operational again, whether it's emergency communications or some other things. So, FEMA and CISA we've always been good partners. We are becoming invaluable to each other, and our existence, in our success is in many ways dependent on how well we work together.
Is there a collaboration that either is occurring or needs to occur, or maybe needs to occur more seriously with legislators, with Congress at that level?
Yeah. So absolutely. I think for us at CISA, Congress really understands the importance of cybersecurity. I mean, it's one of those few things that are really supported on a bipartisan basis. Yeah. And they understand the importance of it and how it is really becoming a piece of the fabric of the American life. And so they have done a number of things to help support CISA with our cyber and physical defense opportunities, both through funding and legislation. And we are very excited to work with Congress to make sure that we are radically transparent with them, with what we're doing and the benefits that we're bringing, and through our efficiency and effectiveness efforts that we're doing, that we are being good stewards of the American tax dollar, and that we are putting it towards the most important things. And you give us $1, we're going to show you what you get for it.
I think you mentioned earlier on in the conversation, maybe something of a perspective shift toward more risk-based decision-making. I see a little bit of that in my world. So Katie Arrington, I don't know if you know her.
I do.
Awesome.
I do.
She's an exciting personality, and she's back.
She's back.
She's back, and she's the DoD CIO. Yep. But she made the news this week in my circles, talking about risk management framework, the RMF.
I spent some time watching it as well, reading about it. Yeah, excellent.
Cool. So that to me kind of is in the same vein. Yeah. It's this idea that, hey, the way we were doing it, well-intentioned, served its time. Yeah. It's time to look to something more progressive, something more realistic, reactive in today's technological landscape. I guess that's sort of administration-wide. We're seeing that in all, across these agencies.
I think so. And I think that that's really what excites me after many, many years in the government is this whole of government approach. Katie's amazing. And I was so enthralled with her. Hey, you do this, this, and this. SBOM, show me what's in it. You're going to get an interim approval. This is huge. And this complements what we're also going to do on the procurement side as well, right? All of these things are going to drive good behavior. She is a visionary in many ways, right? So really looking for how do I meet the requirement, but not belts and suspenders, right? Let me get to where I need to be. It's risk-based, risk-informed, and then she's going to continue to monitor and evaluate, but not stop all progress till we get to the perfect solution. I mean, she really is an inspiration, and we're trying to do that on the civilian side as well, and bring that kind of thought mentality to how do we do this quickly. The cyber landscape, I mean, there's no time to rest.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, every time you wake up, you've got 57 notifications of something that's happened, a new news article, somebody has a ransomware. There was, the gas pipes up in North Dakota, you've got, stuff down, and we have no time to wait, and we've got to be efficient and effective. And that's what, the president is no fooling around. He is like, we are doing this. We're not waiting. I want action plans within 30 days, within 60 days. And Secretary Noem has clearly articulated what she wants to see. And our results, we've got, we're reporting out, but it's not just us, right? So there is such a commitment to working with industry because we cannot do it alone, and we shouldn't do it alone. And, you heard the president talk about giving the states more responsibility, right?
Yeah, executive order back in March, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, take the power away from Washington, give it to the states, empower the states to do what they need to do. Every state isn't the same. That governor, those state legislators, those local governments, they know what they need. They know how best to drive their resiliency, their security. So what is our role? Our role is to help and support, but not to drive. And so everything we're doing, we're looking through the lens of empowering the state and what are the products and services that we bring that help support that, but don't take it over. And so it's a radical mind shift. And, I think that the people who I work with, and I've worked in many agencies, this is an exciting time because these are ideas that may have been, somebody been thinking for a while, and now they can bring it to the table. And everybody in government has a voice. If you have an idea and it's going to make us more efficient, more effective, and deliver on these things, there's the secretary said, I need to hear from the staff. I need you to. She's told leaders, you need to listen to your teams. They are the ones who are in the trenches. They are the ones who are doing this. They are the ones who are with stakeholders. They're with the state and locals. They're with the small businesses. Listen to them. They know. And so, we're collecting that feedback, which is really important. And then we're acting on it. So it is a very exciting time. And there is a lot to do. So it's exciting, but most importantly, it is for Homeland Security. I have kids, grandkids, and my whole purpose is to make sure that I leave this country as safe and secure as when it was given to me.
It's an exciting time. It's a time of change, right? There's, I think all administrations are polarizing in the current political environment. This one's no exception. It's a polarizing administration. I personally have seen a lot of people leave government lately. And so, that's certainly a shifting of things. The workforce is changing. This attitude is changing. As you mentioned, this administration kind of replete with the language of effective, efficient, tightening up the use of budget. There's a lot going on. So it seems like we all need to buckle up.
We do. But, we also need optimism. There is a lot of change going on. But if you look at it in the totality, right, we're spending trillions to bring data centers to the U.S. We are spending lots of money to bring manufacturing back into the U.S. We are really trying to be, a nation of makers and not just consumers. So as employees leave the government, there will be great opportunity to use that really unique skill set that they have and apply it to. Manufacturing is not manufacturing of the old days, right? We are talking highly technical manufacturing, and that's going to require people who have this really deep knowledge of cybersecurity, of engineering, of interdependencies. And so as we look across the horizon of all the things that are happening, I think there's great opportunities for people who are looking, to federal service. I'd like to try something else as employees move on. There will be great opportunity because the manufacturing jobs of today are not going to be the ones of many years ago. It's really going to be high tech. And again, being efficient and effective. So someone who can bring that mindset will be a really important, valuable asset to the private sector. And and I said it earlier, I think the best, a huge benefit is people who are in government and leave government and then come back, because you have that richness, you have that understanding.
Yeah.
And
prevents institutionalization, sort of.
And you can look at things from different ways. You have a whole new ability to look at a problem set, and a whole nother set of background experiences that you'll bring, which is going to make the solution so much richer. I ran my own business for a year, and it was lovely, except, you have to invoice people to make money. Did you know that? People would say, "Are you ever going to invoice me?" I'd say, "Oh, yeah." And I loved it, and it was great helping. I worked with state and local entities. But that feeling of working in the government and really helping in a way that has immediate impact and then kind of large and ripple impacts just drew me back. And I think that this is what the workforce today is going to do. They're going to be federal service, they're going to go private sector, maybe academia, maybe nonprofit, state and local. And then we're going to have people with an amazingly immense and robust set of experiences that I think are going to help solve problems faster and more efficiently with a better result.
I think definitely building up the people who are mission oriented will benefit us in the long run.
Yeah, I agree.
They can leave federal service and go to private industry. And there are criticisms, I'm sure, of the relationship sometimes the government has with industry and sort of insider stuff. But again, there's such a skepticism about people in the institutions that I don't think is that founded. Mm-hmm. Again, everyone I talk to, everyone I've met who is in federal service or local service, even down in my world in local EMS, the people that are in that are generally mission-oriented, believe in what they're doing. People who are properly motivated and believe in the mission and have that passion, we want to invest in them.
We do.
And we want them to be better at what they're doing.
We do. And, you talk about partnership. You have to have trust. It has to be a safe environment, right? And so when we talked about Congress a little bit earlier, one of the things that's really quintessential to building that environment of trust is the Cybersecurity Act of 2015, right? And that's where that information sharing happens, where there's protections for people to bring their vulnerabilities to the government without fear of, litigation or regulatory or, any kind of adverse impact. And so the CISA Act of 2015, which expires at the end of September, is one of those really important tools that we use to create a safe environment for that partnership. If you're telling somebody about a vulnerability, that's a scary thing to do. If you're a for-profit, if you're, it's not always financial, it can be reputational. So to create that environment where there are those protections from disclosure and antitrust, if you're sharing information with other companies, is really important. And so we're constantly looking for ways to create those environments where trusted relationships will allow for the exchange of information. Just as an example, Salt Typhoon, right? We had seen the PRC activity on a federal network, and then we got a tip from somebody. And between the information that we saw on the federal network and the tipper that we got, we were able to go to law enforcement and say, look at what we have. And they were able to then get images of an actor's virtual service provider. We were able to get that picture. And with that information, we were able to understand the complexity of Salt Typhoon. And we were able to warn and help mitigate the impact to the U.S. victims. And so a lot of this happens because people feel safe about sharing information. And so for us, having the operational authorities to do what we do, and then, the ability to have trusted environments is really important, because that's what allows us to bring all this information and work across federal government to really execute on our duty to warn.
I think CISA might be benefiting from its youth in terms of its reputation, and I think it's had a strong run in the first 6 years of liked leadership and their mission and the impact they've had. I see a different sort of view of some other agencies who are trying to make relationships. The NSA comes to mind. In the defense industry, the NSA has some programs through their Cyber Collaboration Center to offer services and information and support to industry. And I can tell you, a lot of people I talk to in industry are very skeptical. The NSA's got a recent history that's checkered, right? And that people don't have a lot of trust in. CISA doesn't have that, but even NSA is starting to reform that, and I see them gaining ground there. I think that's another area where CISA can be such a champion for the federal government and all the other agencies, is to help rebuild the trust in the institutions that, hey, you can work with us, you can bring us information, and we will help protect it and help you get better.
When we find out about an incident or, some kind of cyber attack, we go with the FBI to notify a number, the victims. And it's amazing to see, and we hear this from FBI and others, when FBI goes alone, there's one reaction. When we go together, it's here's a problem, and then CISA brings the solution. Yeah. And just by association, everybody is kind of improved. And NSA is not that different, and they are getting really committed to downgrading information so that we can share it. So there is a commitment across the government to make sure that, having information is great, but if you can't get to the people who can action it, it's really not all that great. And so NSA has committed to moving expeditiously to take information and try and downgrade it so that we can get it to the people who need to know, so that they can take action and protect their entities and ultimately the American people who rely on it. So, it's a
fun thought exercise, because as you were talking about it, absolutely, I feel like if I took a phone call or a visit from the FBI alone, I'd wonder, what did I do? Oh gosh, this is not going to go well. But if it was with CISA, I feel a lot better. Yeah. Which again goes back to I think the reputation and the mission. Understanding what CISA's mission is versus a law enforcement agency, this mission of protection and support speaks to how I feel like you would engage in that scenario.
And just going back to our field force, these are people who work all day, every day in the communities where they live. So when there's an incident, we go to our folks on the ground who are working with their community, and we'll say, hey, do you have a contact at XYZ? We have this entity notification we need to do. And they're the ones who cut by 80% the time it takes. And when there's an imminent ransomware attack or something else, every minute counts. And so to have our team on the ground who work and live in the communities and those relationships that they build, if somebody calls and says, hi, I'm from CISA or FBI, I want to talk to you about an issue, most people think they're being scammed. But when someone calls and say, hey, Bridget, I need you to, so-and-so is going to call you. I need to have a meeting with you to talk about something. It's important.
Yeah, the relationship building is everything.
It's everything.
It lays all the groundwork for everything, that we want to do. And again, it gets back to, what is the mission? We're just trying to protect our critical infrastructure, protect our nation against highly motivated nation state threats who are really doing a lot of damage.
Yeah. And, you think about it, you mentioned hospitals earlier, and, it's so much is done through Bluetooth and, insulin distribution, that's all done by Bluetooth. I mean, there's so many things.
It's a very digital thing.
It's a very digital world. And, to manage your glucose and then administer insulin, or, with rural communities where telemedicine is so important, if any of that goes down, you're impacting the health and safety of the American people, right? If you shut down our energy grid and people, you think about people who are dependent on oxygen or on AC, the elderly or whatever. I mean, all of these things are just go to the core foundation of, the lives we lead. And then you can take it all the way up to the really national security where it can have really not just localized effects, but potentially national impact.
You brought up the executive order about challenging really state and local to also get engaged and take some responsibility and move these objectives forward. Do you know what substantive change or programs are being asked for those agencies and organizations to take on?
I think there's a lot of work going on across the government. For CISA, we're really doing a couple of lines of effort, if you will. One is, really making sure that we understand what do they need and giving them the resources they need so that they can execute it, right? So we are not going in and doing it for them, but we're giving them the tools and resources to do it for themselves. So we're really trying to give them the power to do what they need to be done and not, drive and direct, hold the power, if you will, from Washington. So I think that's it's important for state and locals to understand that cybersecurity is an imperative. And so do you have the right people? Are your budgets reflective of cybersecurity? Are you investing in it? Do you have the right CIOs, the CISOs, the CTOs, et cetera? Are you taking the responsibility for implementing those cybersecurity functions that will reduce your risk? You can't rely on us to do it. You need to own it because you know your systems, you know what you have, you know what you need, you know who's interacting, you know your network.
Right.
And so we're really trying to make sure that they understand what should they be doing and then help them get there. And then, we're stepping back and allowing them to do it, providing, the support and resources, but not owning it for them.
It could be that we're at something of a turning point. I've been in IT and cybersecurity for 15 some odd years. I've seen a lot of change in the last several years, but it's always been this uphill battle. Still, the average user of a system doesn't really care about the security, and a lot of things are just like they see it all as inconvenience. But seeing this approach from everywhere from Congress to the executive branch, reaching out to state and local governments, trying to reach the consumers where they're at, raising the bar for the big, software developers and the big companies across all these different areas, building awareness and putting that challenge to everyone. Like, this is, our entire lives are digital now. It impacts everything from, you mentioned, like AC to the elderly and their, support of their life. It's a good thing for me, I guess, as a cybersecurity professional who's kind of always felt on the back foot of, don't you guys understand the threat that we're up against? Don't you understand what we need? Don't you understand we need resources? And it's important because your whole business now operates electronically. Yeah. It is critical that we protect it. Seeing society start to kind of get it and seeing influence from executive agencies, leadership up on the Hill and everything else, it gives me some hope that maybe we're finally gaining the ground that we need. Unfortunately, I feel like we're kind of behind and we have some ground to make up. But if we can bring this energy and we can, spread the message in that way, that gives me a lot of hope.
My hope is in the generation that grew up with IT, right? So it is just such a part of their lives, grew up with, I have grandchildren who play on a tablet or, are just really proficient. It's just almost innate, organic. And so just that understanding that it's such a critical piece of their life and that you layer on top of that personal accountability that, if you want it to work and you want it to be safe, you've got to do this, this, and this. And then as, the workforce, we more fully ingrain that in the workforce, it has to be a responsibility of everybody. And, we ran the campaign, you probably remember years ago, see something, say something. And of course, it's still fully in effect. But that's true for IT as well, right?
Yeah.
I got a, I don't know about you, but on my phone, I am having so many things delivered, but it's been delayed. Please click here. And I order a lot of stuff online. it could be true. So I really have to think twice about whether or not, I should click on this link. But as we more fully incorporate it into our lives, I need people to think. We need people to say something. They need to understand. And, it's fun to, is this thing about my UPS delivery real? And, you get all of these people who have shared their experience. So to be vulnerable as individuals, I had this happen and it was not good. It's their duty to warn. As we have a duty to warn in the federal government, so does everybody else. And so I'm where we might have felt we're on our back foot, we're going to be leading the charge. And the best thing that we can do is to be radically transparent in what we know. What are those vulnerabilities? And not to be afraid to say, I was a victim. And that's where that safe environment where we want people to share with us what's happened. Because if we don't know what happened, we can't prevent it for others. We can't help you recover, and we can't prevent it for others. So I think of this as really a whole of government, really a whole of community, and our national security is dependent on it.
We have a maxim in security. And it's funny you mentioned "see something, say something." In our onboarding cybersecurity brief at my company, which I still deliver because I want to make sure everyone understands it's highly important. One of the things we put on its own slide in bold is see something, say something. Yeah. A lot of times the first sign of a threat is not the super cool technology that our security folks are doing, which they're doing super cool technology stuff. Still, a lot of times the first indicator of a threat is weird, just something that's off, an off vibe, or you see something that doesn't quite add up. That's often like if we can detect that, we don't have to do the cool technological stuff. We can interrupt it.
And the adversaries are getting really good.
They are.
I mean, these phishing attempts, oh my gosh, or, whether it's voicemail or email or text, and seeing things on a phone, you don't always see the full email address, and it's close, so it looks good. Yep. I mean, they're getting really good. And so it's that critical eye, and then see something. If you see something, say something. And it warrants its own slide, doesn't it? Because you're right, it's not going to be some big flashy thing, because that's not how they're getting in. They're getting in through very elementary ways. Yes. Whether it's phishing, whether it's a vulnerability that we know has been exploited, and they are. So I do think we're on the cusp of some amazing changes in cybersecurity in our country.
I hope so. From a regulatory perspective, especially, just talking about that and talking about risk-informed decision making, I really hope what that translates to is looking at the way cyber attacks primarily happen and really focusing on addressing those. Again, I'm in the defense world. I don't know how much you know about the regulatory activity in the defense world, but going back about 2018, there was a regulation, DFAR 7012, put in to implement these NIST controls, these cybersecurity controls. That became what the CMMC program is. Yep. That's where Katie left her first kind of big mark on the community. It's 2025. This is the first year we're actually conducting the certifications that were first really talked about 7 years ago. And we're now enforcing a standard that could be a great standard, but we lost 7 years of time. One of my major criticisms of that program has been the standard includes 110 things, some of which are very elementary and will interrupt 80% of attacks. Like one of the requirements is use multi-factor authentication. But then there's these really esoteric, hard to understand, sort of gray area things that people have been paralyzed at. Yeah. And I really wish we could have gone back and said, let's just take the 5 biggest controls and let's make sure everyone's doing those, as opposed to what has happened where it's been, let's make sure a small number of you are doing all 110. Yeah. I feel like we would have made a lot of progress. And I hope, with Katie's message recently about how we're going to deal with RMF and try to be more fast, more agile, I also hope from a regulatory standpoint, folks like yourself and CISA with the influence to inform regulators and legislators can say, let's look at the risks, because to your point, most cybersecurity compromise and attacks are still happening at the least sophisticated levels, right? It's simple stuff that we should be addressing. We should have been addressing for a long time.
Couldn't agree more. And, we're not a regulatory agency, but we work with others that are. And, as we think about it, as we take this whole of government approach, one of the things we're talking about is how do we leverage things that are happening across the government to insert basic cybersecurity protocols, right? So, whether it's financial assistance, if you're getting financial assistance, we want to make sure that you're doing, multi-factor authentication. Doing the very basics before we give federal money. But there's, that's just one example, but there could be so many others.
The power of the purse.
Exactly. And then, and they're simple and they should be doing this anyway, but how do we continue to, fold into, if this is a government-wide priority, and I know that it is for this administration, where and how can we seamlessly, appropriately fold it in to further enhance that effort and further build cybersecurity for our nation? So, we're working with agencies across the government to say, how can we help you as you think about what you're doing in cybersecurity for your customers or for your clients?
Do you see, so you've seen many administrations, and I'm sure you've seen all kinds of different leadership approaches and attitudes, everything else. With this administration and, with Secretary Noem, do you see maybe more of a, I don't know how quite to word it, but sometimes it can feel like there's a certain amount that they'll tolerate of change, and then there's like, hey, we don't go that far. Do you feel like this is an administration that's open to just about anything? Because one of the common things, going back to, again, my world, we talk about that regulatory challenge. Well, it's been 7 years. That train left the station. It's moving on. I always wonder, is this administration one that would look at it and say, hey, it's a lost cause, time to go back, versus keep doubling down into regulation that we don't think is fundamentally what we want?
Yeah. Anytime it's 7 years later, it's probably worth a relook, right? And again, this administration does not want to add regulatory burden to, small and medium-sized businesses. It's just not their thing. But they're also not irresponsible. And so they are, I don't think anything's off the table. That's one of the most refreshing things.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
It's one of the most refreshing things. And I think that actually is one of the things that's generating optimism for the federal employees, right? So it's not the same old. They're open to new ideas. They're willing to try new things, and nothing is off the table. And so as we think about, I think that's why we're seeing some of the executive orders. This is why we're seeing, having been in the government for a long time, trying to fix things just around the edges doesn't make the impact that we need. The world we live in today versus 7 years ago, much less 10 years ago or 12 years ago, very different. The threat landscape is different.
Hugely.
Our adversaries are different. We need to think about things differently. And if we're just going to trim around the edges, we are not going to be prepared. Our adversaries are going to take advantage of us. And our national security, our homeland security are at risk. And so I'm excited that, sometimes you got to break something to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And so
move fast, break things.
Yeah, exactly. But be smart. This is the whole agile thing, right? Build it, see if it works. If it doesn't, we're going to tweak it. But I really believe that this administration is committed to accelerating improvements, but not just, trimming around the edges, but getting in deep to the core, fixing it, and then working it, So, and I think that optimism is going to really seep in and help the federal employees because, it's always exciting to be able to put your ideas forward, to put your best foot forward, to think about that my idea might actually, that I've been thinking about, that I've lived with this problem, and I know the solution, someone's going to listen.
I can imagine for a lot of people, the disruption of status quo is what they've been asking for. Right. And for some, it's not, right? So that could explain some of the chop and some of the turmoil. Yeah. But I think it's probably refreshing, as you mentioned, you've been in government. It's a refreshing perspective to, not just ask, well, how do we normally do this? But look at, okay, what's the right way to do this going forward? That could be huge, especially in our industry where, we're looking at cybersecurity regulations and controls that were built in 2015. Mm-hmm. The digital world is so vastly different in 2025, let alone the difference between 2023 and 2025, how different it is. I would really, I hope and I have optimism that the right people will have the right approach to say hey, we have to be more agile. We have to be more risk informed. We have to look at what's happening. We can't stymie progress and innovation, but we also, to your point, we can't be reckless and be dangerous. We have to find the right balance there.
And I think you're right. I think but you've got to move fast, and you're going to have a hiccup. But again, it's really just making sure that you're constantly looking and reevaluating what you're doing, and then, and borrowing from the people who have figured it out, right? So across the government, and specifically within DHS, there is a huge movement to say, who's got the best of this? And we've got some systems and some things in CISA that other components are saying, hey, can we just lift and shift and borrow it? And so we're saving time, we're saving money, we're having consistency, and really getting to top-notch cyber secure products and systems that we use that we can just share across DHS and then potentially to other agencies. So I think it's a really smart move to find who's figured it out.
Do you feel like that wasn't happening before?
I don't think there was that kind of collaboration. No, we were all kind of stovepiped, and CISA was here. FEMA and CISA worked at the local levels, but not really at that level, and not really system enterprise wide. And I think that this administration has brought in a lack of pride of ownership, if you will, right? So who's got the best? Let's get it. Let's put it in.
It's not about your kingdom.
It's not about your kingdom. And as we think about the reimagining of CISA or the reimagining of DHS, it's not about the kingdom, right? It's about what's the authority, what are those functions, and who's the best person to deliver them. What are those things that are distracting us from those critical principal missionaries that we should be doing? And let's not let that detract us from what we're really supposed to be doing. So it is a real different mindset that's fast and demanding and accountable, but also risk-informed and in many ways kind of innovative. And it's this curiosity, right? It's this culture of curiosity. Why? How? How come? Should we? Could we? When will we? So it's this, I call it the culture of curiosity, right? Why? Why not? How can we? Who can? How, and so it is, in DHS in very real time, who has something that can help with the border? Who has something that can help with this? And really looking at a one DHS perspective, who has the best solution that's secure, because national security, homeland security is the core of everything we're doing. And then seeing how we can, expand that across the department to save us time and money that then we can reinvest those resources to other core areas. So it's a culture change, and it's really exciting, and it brings us closer together and can provide opportunities for our team to learn more, cross-pollinate, understand what the other components do. And again, I think it's just a professional development opportunity as well.
I think it's a wise approach.
I think it is, and it's kind of exciting.
Now, we've talked a lot about CISA. We've talked a lot about the federal government, state. We've talked a lot about you. I want to ask a bit. I think one thing I just noticed in the topic we were just kind of covering, you got very animated. You're clearly energetic and excited about the change and about the opportunity. I think that probably is, grounded in your history, supporting multiple federal agencies and being involved in government for a long time. I know you came out of government for some time, did a private industry, and then came back to CISA. Let's talk about your background. Why even start into public service? What drew you there, and what has kept you so engaged and so involved and energetic today, animated today about the opportunity in front of you?
Well, I mentioned I'm 6th of 7 children. So my dad was a Marine. Both my parents are from Taunton, Massachusetts. And they got married, and my dad was in the Marines right after college, and they had a baby, and the baby died very young. And they had a second child, and the doctor said it's this disease we don't know much about, cystic fibrosis, and we don't know much about it, but it's going to take a lot of care, and it's going to be very expensive. And so they said you should stay in the military for the healthcare. So my father had been accepted to law school, Boston College, and put that to the side to stay in the military to support, to make sure he could provide for his daughter. And subsequently, 5 of the children had cystic fibrosis. My sister and I are perfectly healthy. And my mom was a Latin teacher. And so I grew up in a household where it was, God, family, country, right? And it was service, service, service. And so for me, it was I just saw it. I grew up in it. I grew up that life, run to the gunfight. Don't shy away from hard things. Go and make the situation better for others. And so for me, it was just how I was raised. And with all of that craziness, watching, my 4 sisters and 1 brother die, there was such joy. And there was so much opportunity, and that every day was a new gift, and that you brought your best self as you run towards that gunfire, right? And so for me, going into public service, seeing my dad in the Marines, and then I became a history teacher, and my mom was a Latin teacher after my brother started kindergarten, and seeing what they did with their lives, right? So, they were masters, they were kings, they were queens, revered by the people they served. And so that's kind of what got me into public service and working, and understanding that I was here to do something more for other people, and that there was joy. And if I could bring a teeny bit of knowledge, a whole lot of optimism, and help facilitate the growth and potential of others, then I was doing good stuff, right? So I started at the Small Business Administration. What a fabulous opportunity. Understanding small businesses are just the oxygen of our economy, and really understanding how they worked. I got a lot of operational experience, and then I got to see it from the business side, helping businesses in my own community grow, trying to get capital, trying to figure out how they hire employees, where they spend their money, what does their P&L look like? So I got to learn a lot. And really understand the importance of that. And there is a disaster component in the Small Business Administration. So they give loans to small businesses, homeowners, and renters. So I got to really see how that played. So in a disaster, the impact to our small businesses could take down. The faster they got back up, the better the community recovered. Sure. Faster, better, stronger. And then I went to FEMA and just had a fabulous opportunity there, as their chief operation officer. And then I ran their grants program. And again, learning about extending that disaster. How do we create a resilient community so that we have economic security and national security? And just seeing the work and the commitment of my colleagues every day. Yeah. I mean, we had people who worked 82, 96 days in a row, no days off. Right? I spent months in California after the Paradise fires. I was in the floods. It was, to see these people every day work from the government side, but also to see the resilience of the American people is enough to catapult you for years. It's just that this is what we're made of, and we are going to recover. And then I retired and did my own business for a year, and it was great fun, but I missed the camaraderie. I missed being in the thick of it. I missed being able to support in some way, shape, or form the bigger mission. So I came to CISA, and I love it because it's kind of all the things in the past 30 years, and
you can see a thread from each bit there that
and
feeds
this
into
is
who
really
you are now.
The culmination. And so every day I really try to help bring people together so that solutions are built where we really do, defend and protect our country so that my children, my grandchildren, and the generation after have the best that my father fought for and made sure that I had. So, it's a long and circuitous route to where I am, and I don't know where that journey will be, but I have great hope and great optimism. And what I'm seeing today with this administration and kind of this be bold, be inquisitive, don't shy away, run to the gunfire. This is what I love. And, if I can bring anybody with me, let's go, because together we're stronger. And that's what the secretary's talking about at RSA. We all have a role. We're in this together, because if we fail, the nation fails. And the imperative is so huge. And the benefit, though, is so important.
I love a nonlinear path.
I'm your girl.
I love that, and I think it often makes the most well-rounded people. And in a role like yours, I think it requires well-rounded life experience, well-motivated mission, true believer, but all that cross-discipline knowledge and experience and the relationships I'm sure you've built through that career, I think, puts you in a very unique spot to be what you need to be. And that's, I think we kind of hit on a number of times now, It's about those relationships, bringing people together, connecting, sharing information, sharing knowledge. That's an aspect of the federal government that I've always seen where they silo and there's competition and there's not a lot of sharing. There's kingdom building. You see that in private industry as well. People build kingdoms and they don't want to give them up. That's a good sign for me to hear that's not the culture right now. The culture is, hey, there's problems, we need to address them. And if the best way I can address my problem I'm responsible for is ask you for the resource that you have, put pride to the side, man. Absolutely. It's about addressing that problem.
It is. And, as these executive orders have come out and, a lot of them have short time frames and what are you doing? How are you doing it? There has been more coordination across government. I have friends at VA, I have friends at SBA, at FEMA, within the department and then, at other agencies who are calling and say, hey, how did y'all interpret this? What are you doing? Do you have a template? What are you doing? And so the sharing of information, through that exercise has continued to tie the government together so that we're sharing information. Even if it starts at this level, then again, the relationship has been built so if something happens. And you said, if I have a problem, I'll ask you for help. Or can you fix it, right? So again, and to be generous, there is so much work to go around that there's enough ways for people to shine, right? To give the glory to the person who's fixed the solution. And I think that that's what we're seeing. I mean, transition is hard, let's be clear. And it has been hard for people. But there is also just, there's a level of excitement that's coming, and there's collaboration within DHS specifically that the secretary is really working hard to coalesce and to make sure that it is fully, functioning. But also across government. And that's really fun to see other agencies who, folks I haven't seen in a while call and say, hey, you may not be the right person, but who in your agency is doing A, B, and C? And then I can connect them. And then, we have a better solution for the government and for the American people we're serving. And so I think it's really exciting. And I think, we're going to have some transition, and I think there's going to be great opportunity. And for states and locals and for the private sector, I think there's going to be such a boom for private sector. I think some of the jobs that are going to come out are going to be really highly technical, high-paying jobs, and we're going to bring manufacturing back. We're going to be a country of builders. We're going to be making stuff. We're going to be sufficient for we can't be relying on other countries who don't share our values or don't always may not want to help us. And so we've got to be able to really make sure that we are building stuff that we need, creating great jobs, building that economic resilience, because economic security is national security and cybersecurity is national security. And the interconnectivity is really fun to see in a tangible way, seeing all these things come together.
Well, I look forward to the RSA conference. I'm very interested to hear from the secretary. Clearly, CISA is going to require us to keep our eyes on you. A lot of change, a lot of excitement. I love the energy. So the tradition here to wrap up our show is to talk about optimism, which is normally not a through line in the conversations I have. A lot of times the conversations we're having, we're talking about big, scary problems. We're talking about nation state actors trying to disrupt our way of life. And we're often talking about breakout of conflict, Ukraine and Gaza and all these other sort of topics where it can lead to a condition of pessimism where it's like, man, there's just so much in front of us. A through line through all of the episodes that we filmed of The Watchers, and it's over 20 at this point. We've talked to a lot of people like yourself in positions of influence and have storied careers. All of them, I can pull a through line of optimism. Like there's this underlying optimism through all of them. Against all the challenges and the fact that there's gunfire at all to run toward. I always love to ask people where their optimism comes from. And I get wide-ranging answers from some of what you've already talked about of like what's going on with the administration, the change. But I also think your background and the example set in your family, where does your optimism come from?
It's really just comes from that, every day is a gift. And it is joy, happiness is a choice. Every day is a gift. You come in, you're given talents that you need to bring. There are huge challenges, and the nation state actors are real. And, my daughter is in the Army, and I'm getting ready to see her deployed for a year to a not great part of the globe. And you know what gives me optimism is as I see her with her soldiers, I see these 18-year-olds, these 19-year-olds who are committed to defending our way of life. That's where my optimism comes from. My optimism comes from seeing somebody at NSA, a young, bright mind who's going to go to work for NSA, who's going to hunt that adversary, who's going to find out what they're doing. They're going to find a way to stop it. It is the youth, the people who are going into public service, who are going towards the sound of gunfire, not for themselves, but for others. And as I see my daughter's soldiers, who are younger and younger every day, but who are committed, who are there, who know they're going into danger, and they are preparing, they're training, they're exercising, and they are putting their lives on the line so that the rest of us here have and enjoy the liberties and freedoms we have. What can we do here in the homeland to marry up what they're doing? And then we create really a strong, healthy, and productive society, not just for today, for years to come. So my optimism comes from those people who are doing the job every day.
Bridget, it's a beautiful note to end on. I truly appreciate you taking time out of your very important role to come sit down and spend some time with me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you again for coming on The Watchers.
Thanks so much. And if there's anything we can do, this has been a pleasure, and really thank you for the opportunity to share some information.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Watchers. For more great content, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our channel. We'll see you on the next one.